So in the last lesson, I got into talking about using the neighborhood to internalize each neighborhood. That's really your starting point. And what we just went through is a great way to do it. Then plugging it into a song that you may know and love with a chord progression that suits itself to going 1, 4, 1, 5, 1 is a great way to, again, internalize this. It also is a great thing to do because the most common chord progression within bluegrass and a lot of Western folk music is a chord progression that I believe you have a PDF of, where you have 2 measures of 1, 2 measures of 4, 2 measures of 1, 2 measures of 5, and again, 2 measures of 1, 2 measures of 4, 1, 5, 1, 1. That is the nuts and bolts of so much Western music that you, if you can get these neighborhoods down over that chord progression, you are set up to play a lot of different songs. One of my favorite songs that has this chord progression is a good old standard bluegrass song, Your Love is Like a Flower. And so what I want to do right now is spend a little bit of time just letting that song play and having us practice these neighborhoods in. And I'm going to just stay within one neighborhood, and I'm going to stay within the first neighborhood, the root position neighborhood, for the beginning and a verse and a chorus, and the solo that comes after, which you're going to hear on this track. Then I'm going to shift up neighborhoods for the second verse, chorus, solo, and then up to the third neighborhood, second inversion neighborhood, for the third verse, chorus, and out. So see if you can follow along with me here. I found a great version of Your Love is Like a Flower that is on a Vassar Clements record called Full Circle. This was released in 2001, and Ricky Skaggs is singing lead. Peter Rowan is on this record, playing guitar, singing harmony. Bela Fleck on banjo, Sam Bush on mandolin, and of course Vassar Clements on fiddle. I'm going to cue this up for you here. And I'm going to play it more learning tempo through our handy tool of the amazing slowdowner here. So we are going to have full ability to catch these neighborhoods. We're not going to go too fast yet. Here it comes. So let's go ahead and get your index finger up to the C sharp for first inversion A. And I'm going to just hit play again. We're going to be back at the top of the tune here. The song, that's okay. I'm just going to play in this first inversion neighborhood, and then I will cue you as to when to move up to second inversion neighborhood. Here we go. to second inversion neighborhood, and I'm going to forward the track to where we stopped. So second inversion neighborhood, you want your index finger to get up to the 9th fret of the G string, and then you are playing frets 11 and 12, either with ring finger and pinky or second and third finger, middle and ring. And then the index goes up a whole step to the 4 chord with the barred 12th frets there. When you go to the 5 chord, you don't have to move the index at all. You stay in bar for root position E. Okay, here we go. So we have played in the basic neighborhoods. If that is moving quickly for anyone out there, feel free to just kind of do a downbeat when the chords change, or at any point we're on that 4 chord, for instance, takes a second to get there. Just feel free to just do a downbeat. You don't have to stay in time right now. Just grab what you can. Okay, now what I want to do next, and this is in your practice sessions, what I would be wanting you to go for. With this chord progression that we have for Your Love is Like a Flower, perfect chord progression for practicing beginning to move between chord inversions during a chord progression. So in this case, because the chord progression has mostly throughout the chord progression 2 measures of each chord, it makes the perfect exercise for starting to move between neighborhoods. And I talked about this a little bit in the first session, but I do want to do some of this with you guys so you get this the feel for how this is going to work. So now I'm going to switch over to Strum Machine, and I have the same chord progression for Your Love is Like a Flower. And what I want you to do is on the first measure of the 1 chord, I want you to be in root position A. The second measure, you are going to travel up your A major chord inversion series to the second shape that you find, first inversion, A. So we'll get 1 measure for the root position A, then we're going to shift up to the next neighborhood for that second measure of A, and then we're going to find the chord in the next measure changes to a 4 chord. So when the chord changes, we're going to stay in the neighborhood that we're in. Find that chord. Here's our 4 chord in root position. And we're going to get a second measure of D, at which point we're going to travel down the D major series to this second inversion D. And so let's maybe just do that much of this alternating or moving between neighborhoods together. I'll count us in for 2 measures of 1 and 2 measures of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 4. Back down to the first neighborhood for that second measure of 4. I'll do that again. 2, 3, 4. 1. Shifting up to 1 in first inversion. 4. Back down to 4. And we'll do that one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 1, 4, 3, The next thing that happens in this chord progression is you come back home to 1 from this 4 chord. So we're going to stay in this first neighborhood, come back to root position A. And then we find this is the top of the second phrase in the song. Starts with a measure of A in root position, a second measure of A, so we're going to do that same shift up to first inversion. And then the next chord change is a 5 chord. And we are going to stay in the second neighborhood for a 5 chord here for 1 measure. Then we get a second measure of 5. We are going to shift back to the first neighborhood for the 5 chord here. So we're only moving between the first and second neighborhoods right now. And we're going to drill the 2 measures of 1 and 2 measures of 5 in a few times together. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Shifting up to first inversion. 1. 5 chord. Back down to 5. And we'll do that again. 1, 2. Here we go. 1. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. 5. All right. Now in this chord progression, just like the melody, the third phrase is the same as the first phrase in the melody. And we find the same thing in the chord changes. We're going to have 2 measures of 1 followed by 2 measures of 4 again. So let's go ahead and play through that one time together, just like we did previously. 1, 2, here we go. 1, in first inversion, 4 chord, back down to the 4 chord in the first neighborhood. Let's do that one more time. 2, 3, 4. 1, 1, 4, 4. All right. And moving on to the fourth phrase. The fourth phrase has 1 measure of 1, 1 measure of 5, back home to the 1 chord for 2 more measures. Because it's just 1 measure of the 1 chord before the chord change to 5, I'm going to stay in the same neighborhood. So I'm going to start in this first neighborhood with 1 measure of 1, and then come to the 5 chord down here for a measure, and then come home to 1. So let's do that together one time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 chord, 2, 3, 4. Back home to 1. All right. Now let's put all of that together and see how much of it sticks. Again, if you can't stay in the boom-a-chicka rhythm with me, just grab the shape whenever you can get there and see how much you can grab. Even if you can only start, whenever we're going to be in that first neighborhood, just aim for that neighborhood if you have that much down. That's just fine. Or you could play the whole thing in the first neighborhood if you're not ready to shift, and just keep practicing your first neighborhood. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 chord, shifting up to first inversion, 1 chord. 4 chord, back down for 4 chord. 1 chord again, shifting to 1 in first inversion. 5 chord, 5 chord, 1. 2 measures here. All right. Hopefully that is feeling good to folks. Let's do that one more time. I want to make a suggestion here for something that you can do in your rhythm playing that's fun to do. Because we're going kind of slow right now for backing up a song, I want you to just go ahead and practice it every time we change an inversion or a chord change. Whenever you feel like it and there's a change in chord, I want you to practice. Normally I'm having you do a boom, chick, boom, and chicka, and that first boom I'm having you play is just a single bass note. Right now I want you to practice doing what sometimes referred to as a rake, where you play the full chord on the downbeat of 1 for a measure. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. So this can really just be a nice way to delineate the beginning of a section or the beginning of a phrase. I definitely would not do it as often as I'm doing it right now, but I want you to get used to trying this out, so feel free to do it every time we move chords just to get used to that if you want to add that in the mix here. Let's go ahead and play through that chord progression one more time all together, shifting between first and second neighborhoods only. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 1. Now to the 4. 4. Back home to 1. Shifting first inversion 1 to the 5 chord. 1. 4. 4. 1. Down low for 1 measure of 5. 1. All right. So that is moving between the first 2 neighborhoods, and I want to do that now between the second neighborhoods. I'm just going to go ahead and move on into those. Hope you guys are doing all right out there. What I want to do is move on to adding the sevenths of the chords into these, each of the 3 chord inversion, basic chord inversion shapes, so that you have that to start adding into the mix. And actually, this chord progression is such a good time for learning to add the 7th into the chord shapes. Often in folk music, bluegrass, the 7th of the chord is not automatically just put on the chord. In fact, it's not that common, actually. Despite what you might see in chord progressions listed online or even in Strum Machine, the flat 7 of the chord is typically used as a transitional note. So you would start with your basic chord triad and then add the 7th before you're changing chords. And that the 7th of the chord has this really cool effect. It's one of these chord tones that creates a little bit of friction just by nature of where it's falling in relation to any chord. It's sitting a whole step below the root of the chord. So that's on an A chord, that would be a G natural note. Here they are against each other. Actually spread across the octave, they have a little less dissonance. But it's a little bit of a rub, a little bit of friction. So it puts a little lean on a chord, like it's wanting to go somewhere, it's needing resolution. So once you add the 7th on, there's that little bit of tension that wants resolution. That flat 7 will move in half-step motion to the 3rd of the chord change that you are heading to. It just happens to work out that way. So my G note on the A chord, that flat 7, will go down a half step and hit the F sharp, the 3rd of the D chord. And there you hear it resolve into that 3rd. So A without the 7. And finding the 7th here at the 5th fret of the D string on this root position A chord. So whichever finger you're playing that 3rd of the chord with, the flat 7 and 3rds make a backwards diagonal line, unlike 3rds and roots that have a forwards moving diagonal line that you know from your basic A chord, your 3rd and root. The 3rd and 7th are going to be having a diagonal backwards line right next door to each other on the fretboard here. And that is true whether the 3rd or 7th is the high or low note in that interval. So in this case, the 7th, here's my 3rd, C sharp, 4th fret of the A string. So if I play G above that C sharp, still has that backward leaning diagonal line. I could also play the G above C sharp and have that 3rd and flat 7 relationship. So this is where, again, if you can really start noting which chord tone is in which part of your chord shape, you can start navigating some interesting, make some interesting choices in your backup. Like, okay, I want to add the 7th, here's my 3rd, I know how to find that shape to help me put the 7th on the chord there. And then if I'm moving to the 4 chord, if I'm in this fingering, I can just flip the fingers around into that 3rd of the 4 chord, F sharp, and D, the root of the D chord, and have that basic D triad. So if we practice that move, we go from A in root position, add your 7th at the 5th fret of the D string, and then just let these 2 fingers change strings but stay on their same frets that they were on the A7 chord. Let's try that again. From A major, add your 7. Let those fingers invert to a D major. Now, when we look at the D major in second inversion, we see this is such a good example of how to find a flat 7. There's really 2 key ways to locate the flat 7 for any chord. The most fundamental way would be looking for a whole step below the root of the chord. In this case, the root of the chord D is up here at the 5th fret of the A string. So a whole step below that is C natural. And I could keep that 3rd of the chord here, the F sharp, so I'd have A in the bass, the 5th of the D chord, 3rd of the D chord, F sharp, and there's the C natural, and again we see that backwards leaning diagonal line between the 3rd F sharp and the flat 7, C natural. So in this chord voicing, I can use either the 3rd or the root to help me eyeball or locate that flat 7 of the D chord. And now what's nice is if we are returning home to a 1 chord here, again, you're hearing that 7th of the D chord. Here's that basic D triad. Maybe notice the lack of tension here. And then putting the 7th has just a little crunch to it maybe. And then I'm going to take that 7th up to a half step to the 3rd of the 1 chord, C sharp. So let's try that together. We'll do 1 measure of D major, 1 measure of D7, and 1 measure of A, listening for that tension that comes in and then the resolution to the 3rd of the A chord. 1, 2, here we go. D, D7, up to A. One more time. Find your D chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. D, D7 to A major. And I do want to mention that on this A major chord in root position, we found the flat 7 of the chord in relation to the 3rd of the chord over here at 5th fret of the D string, G note. We could find it in relation to the root of the chord by letting that low A note go down to open G. When the seventh is in the bass note of a chord, we really feel that tension come in a little more strongly, and it really has a pull. If I were going to the 5 chord, it would go up a half step to the G sharp, the third of the 5 chord. And I love that voicing. You'll notice that on your D chord in root position. I want to show you this on a closed position, root position chord. So I'm on fret 7, 7, and 9. In this case, I'm going to let the index come down to the 5th fret of the G string to a C note. So the flat 7 on the root position chord, when you drop the root down to the flat 7, looks like this. Whole step apart for each finger there, or skipping 1 fret between fingers, and a forwards diagonal. In this case, you can bring each one of those notes on the outside of this voicing back in. The high note could come down a whole step from F sharp to E. And the C note in the bass, C natural at the 5th fret of the G string, could scoot up a half step to the 3rd of the A chord, and then you're back in first inversion A. So up here, I could go from D to D7 to A, in that way. Quickly here, we will look at the 5 chord. Because we are in first inversion, we will, by going through the first neighborhood here and adding the 7ths, we're learning how to add a flat 7 on all 3 chord inversion shapes. You've probably noticed by now that each neighborhood does have all 3 chord inversion shapes. So this is a great way to just demonstrate on all 3 shapes how to find the 7th. It's by looking within the neighborhood. So first inversion chord shape is what we use for the 5 chord here. Down here in first position on this E chord, this is a great one to show you because the root is on the D string 2nd fret. And in this case, I want to go to open D because that would be a whole step below. And I do use this voicing a lot. So good to know that you're going to need an open D here. But let's look here if we were in first inversion A chord, which again is frets 6, 7, and 7. In this case, I'll be playing that 7th in a closed pattern here, no open strings. The root of the chord is on the D string, 7th fret, the A note. I want to drop that back a whole step. In terms of fingering, the best way to do that is to let the index finger play 2 frets below the root, that 5th fret G note on the D string, and then the middle finger comes to the C sharp note here at the 6th fret, replaces the note the index finger had been playing in the basic A major triad first inversion shape. So that is how to get to that flat 7 on first inversion shape. So as you are practicing in these 7ths, you can use that same vehicle that we used, vehicle being the chord progression for your Love is Like a Flower, to get used to the 7ths while you are staying in one neighborhood at a time at first, if you're not used to them yet. So I would use the 2nd measure of whatever chord, because we're getting 2 measures of most chords. So if I start with the 1 chord for 2 measures, I would play the first one with just the basic triad. The 2nd measure, I would add the 7th. In this case, I know I'm heading to a 4 chord. This is a great 7th when going to the 4 chord in this neighborhood, the 5th fret of the D string, because I can just flip the fingers around. On the D chord, adding the 7th back here before I come home to 1. Next, when I'm heading to the 5 chord in this neighborhood, it's nice to let the low root drop down to the open G for the 7th on the A chord, because I'm going to bring that G up to a G sharp for the 5 chord. Then on my 5 chord, the 2nd measure, I'm going to let go of that E note in the 2nd fret of the D string and play open D and get my 5 chord with the flat 7. So I'm going to play through your Love is Like a Flower progression one time, adding the 7th on whenever I get a 2nd measure of each chord. Here I go. 2, 3, 4, 1. 1 with a 7. 4. 4 with the 7th. Back to A. With the low 7 on the A. 5. 5 with the 7th. A7. D7. A 5, 7, 1. There, I just did a quick split measure. 2 beats on 5, 2 beats with the 5, 7, taking it back home to the 1 chord. Then you could do that in each neighborhood and getting familiar with, now that you know the 7th on each of the 3 shapes, you can find that in your new neighborhood. Practice it in with that chord progression, and the 7th should start settling in a good bit. You also have a vehicle now for practicing moving between neighborhoods. So I would start making sure each neighborhood is really solid first. If you want to include the 7ths in that practice before you go to alternating between neighborhoods or transitioning between neighborhoods, that would be great too. And then start transitioning between neighborhoods, neighborhood 1 and 2, neighborhood 2 and 3. From there, you can just kind of maybe start improvising a bit with strum machine going or a recording of your Love is Like a Flower, something like that. And just seeing when it feels musical in relation to a melody that you're hearing or a solo that you're hearing, to actually travel in your chord inversion shapes. Hopefully this is giving you a good guide at how to build these up and ways to start putting them into play.
That's great, Sharon. Let's see. One question to clarify. Joanne was asking about finding the inversions on the one in the neighborhoods, the 1, 4, and 5s. The all of those shapes and the neighborhoods are written out in Sharon's first handout in session 1. So do refer to those, and those sessions all will live, or the handouts will live in each session that they were originally referring to. If there are 2 parts of the session recordings, once we post them about a week or so after the live sessions happen, the handouts will remain under part 1. So just remember that. So there is a lot of good stuff. You want one question here, Sharon?
Yes, and before the question, I'll just mention, since you did a little housekeeping there on where to find things, I encourage everybody to maybe have those neighborhoods printed out and have them with you at each session, as well as I believe there is a list of 1, 4, and 5 chords and the chord tones within 1, 4, and 5 chords in different keys that maybe we made available when you registered. Keep that printed out and handy so that you have those references as I'm talking about different chord structures throughout the course. That would be really helpful each session.
And maybe this is just something to keep in mind for future sessions. But Phil was asking about, given all the neighborhood options, when do you use traditional chop chords? So maybe that's something to think about for future.
And you can play these chord inversions for chop chords. And I use these, substitute. You can chop any one of these. So they will work just like your basic chop chords work. You don't have to, they are not always associated with boom, chick, rhythm, or sustaining or anything like that. They work great as chop chords as well. Thanks so much, you guys. Thanks for being here again. If you do have a little question, shoot it to Peghead Nation. Dan's been shooting them to me. You can contact me on my Instagram page, and I will answer you as best I can there. And thanks so much again. I look forward to seeing you guys in the third session.